One country has the oil. One man wants leverage. And millions of people are stuck in the middle. Trump's name flashes across the headlines. Oil rigs throb under a hot sky. Caracas streets blur past. Faces that look exhausted, proud, unbroken. Back home, gas price signs tick upward like a threat, and cable news voices collide into a single word: crisis. And suddenly Venezuela is in the same sentence as America first. So here's the question no one wants to say out loud. Does Donald Trump want Venezuela's oil land? If so, why? Because once you see what it really represents, the next move starts to look inevitable. Venezuela is a nation sitting on a fortune, with a population living like it's broke. On paper, it's an oil superpower, oceans of reserves that make politicians' eyes shine and markets hold their breath. But reserves aren't the same as production. You can own the biggest vault in the world and still have no key. Years of decay, sanctions, and corruption turned pumping oil into a struggle, not a guarantee. And it isn't light, easy crude, it's heavy, the kind certain refineries are built to handle. If you control this spigot, you don't just influence prices, you influence governments. And that's where Trump enters the story not as a tourist, but as a negotiator who treats countries like leverage. To Trump, foreign policy isn't diplomacy, it's a scoreboard. Wins are headlines, losses are weakness. He doesn't speak in treaties. He speaks in pressure, in leverage, in the promise that force of will can bend reality. Energy dominance becomes a chant, a badge of pride, a way to tell struggling families, I can make life cheaper. I can make America feared again. Oil turns into a domestic weapon. Gas prices, tough talk, sanctions as theater, and enemies chosen for maximum impact. But when politics becomes a deal, who becomes the bargaining chip? But Venezuela isn't just oil barrels, it's a battlefield of sanctions, suffering, and a regime that learned how to survive. When oil pays the bills, whoever controls oil controls the country. In Venezuela, that control hardens into a system circle insulated behind uniforms, patronage, and fear, while ordinary families count meals, medicines, and days. The economy didn't just collapse. It was pushed, pulled, and bled by misrule, corruption, and the tightening fist of isolation. Sanctions can squeeze a regime's money. Yes, but they can also squeeze the people first. The ones who never signed up for this fight. That's the trap. Punish the strongman without punishing the street. And every president who tries ends up choosing who suffers now and who might be free later. So if the situation is this messy, why would Trump step closer instead of backing away? Every spike at the pump becomes a political emergency. Presidents swear they don't control prices, then get punished like they do. One jump in crude, one refinery hiccup, one war headline, and the story writes itself. Weak leader, expensive life. In that climate, oil isn't a commodity, it's a leva. And even the talk of new supply can move markets, calm panic, or trigger it on cue. Venezuela becomes a tempting card because influencing its output isn't stealing oil, it's shaping the flow. Rewriting expectations. Voters want relief. Moralists want accountability. Strategists want leverage. And Trump speaks to the pressure cooker. But gas prices are the simple reason. The deeper reason is geopolitical, and it gets darker. Trump doesn't just see oil. He sees who else is touching it. Venezuela is an isolator, it's plugged into lifelines. Chinese money, Russian backing, sanctions-busting networks, and debt deals paid back in barrels. That's not just economics. It's influence you can measure in ports, security contracts, and votes at the UN. So Venezuela becomes a chess square in a bigger match. If Beijing and Moscow can anchor themselves in America's hemisphere, they gain leverage close to home, strategic and real. Keep rivals out of our backyard isn't policy jargon. It's a rallying cry that sells. But great power games have a habit of crushing the countries caught between. And then there's the third motive, the one no one says plainly, because it sounds too blunt. The line between leverage and loot is where democracy get tested. For some supporters, we should get there. Oil isn't a policy, it's a symbol. Dominance, payback, a strongman aesthetic where strength means taking, not negotiating. But the reality is narrower. A U.S. president can tighten sanctions, issue licenses, recognize leaders, freeze assets, and bargain through back channels. What's extreme force occupation? Outright seizure would be reckless, costly, and politically radioactive. Yet the fantasy persists because it feels simple. One villain, one resource, one solution. Here's the catch. When you squeeze a regime through oil, the first pressure often hits the powerless, not the protected. So if taking the oil is mostly fantasy, why does the idea keep coming back again and again? People don't share nuance. They share a feeling. This story goes viral because it offers clean villains, clean rewards, and a clean target. Maduro, our oil, cheap gas, infotainment takes a messy country and turns it into a snackable fight. You can pick a side and within 5 seconds. Two camps form instantly. Camp A hears strength plus lower prices equals win. Finally, someone fights. Camp B hears imperialism plus civilian suffering equals shame. Here we go again. And the algorithm loves both, because outrage travels faster than context. Each clip becomes proof, each headline becomes ammunition, and the complicated middle gets starved. But here's where it gets real. What would a Trump-style Venezuela move actually look like in practice? Here's the playbook: power without invasion. Sanctions tighten. Choke the regime's cash pipeline. Make every dollar harder to move. Selective licenses. Let limited oil flow, but only through approved channels and U.S. terms, with strings attached. Recognition shifts. Treat one side as the real government, turning legitimacy into a weapon and isolating Maduro further. Secondary pressure. Punish banks, shippers, and middlemen who keep the system alive, even outside Venezuela. Messaging. Sell it as saving democracy, or protecting America, depending on the audience. It sounds clean on paper, buttons, levers, headlines, but on the ground, the pressure doesn't hit an abstract regime. It collides with human beings. Oil policy doesn't stay in oil countries. It shows up at borders. When money gets choked, and systems fracture, it isn't ministers who skip meals, it's families. Shortages deepen, black markets grow, hospitals run thinner, and instability turns everyday life into a departure plan. Then the ripple hits the region: Colombia, Brazil, the Caribbean, and eventually the U.S. border, where Venezuela becomes a talking point in America's own immigration wars. That's the moral bill: using suffering as leverage versus refusing to normalize cruelty because it's strategic. And the haunting question sits there, unanswered. If your strategy works but breaks people, did it work? And now the final twist. Even if Trump got what he wanted, would America actually win? The scariest part isn't one policy, it's the precedent. Because this story isn't only about Trump or Venezuela. It's about what America thinks power is. Is it domination, treating nations like prizes and resources like trophies? Or is it restraint, using leverage with limits? Because democratic identity is supposed to mean something when no one's watching. The title question flips into a harder one. What do we become when we talk like empires, even if we call it security? A serious country can be tough without being cruel, strategic without being predatory, and realistic without giving up dignity. Accountability matters not just for them, for us. So here's the question. If oil is power, who should have it? And what should they be allowed to do with it? So that's the real equation. Trump plus Venezuela plus oil equals a leverage war, sold as strength, felt as consequences. Now I want to hear from you. Is this smart strategy or a dangerous obsession with dominance? And second, should the U.S. ever trade ethics for energy security, even temporarily? Drop your take in the comments, because how you answer tells me what kind of power you think America should use. If this helped you see the rhetoric versus the reality, hit like, subscribe, and share it with the one friend who always says, just take the oil. And watch the next video, because it gets messier. Sanctions aren't just policy, they're a business model. Next, the hidden pipeline of influence who profits no matter who wins.